This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
All right, so obviously there's a lot to get to, and we're going to get to it. He's Greg, I'm Nick. You know the deal. Before we get into the starting quarterback, the biggest known mystery in the world, if we want to call it that. Before we get into that, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly. When you play $5, you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. It's official. It was not made official yesterday. We're recording this Thursday afternoon, but it was made official this morning at 8:30. I'm sure all of the reporters out there. Greg, did you make it down there?
I was down there, yes.
So I'm sure Greg and many others were thrilled that they got their ass up at about 7 a.m. to head down to Gillette for this 8:30 press conference, the big news, the big announcement. And 90 seconds later, it was over. In and out, just like that. So before we get into the decision, Greg, just your thoughts overall over the last 48 hours or so and how this was handled. Was it weird to you?
Yeah, it was, Nick. And not just because I like my beauty sleep and need my beauty sleep. It's just odd to me, Nick. It was another in a series of missteps for Jerod Mayo since he's gotten this job. There was the whole phrase, what did he say about spending? Like, we're going to burn through some cash. We're going to burn some cash and, those type of things. And then, going on radio this week and then even doubling down, talking to the media 30 minutes later and saying, look, Drake outplayed Jacoby. Okay. And then waiting on the quarterback decision. They set out the media schedule and they're off. I think they're off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, as far as the players aren't there and everything. And so you knew you had 2 days this week. Now, Wednesday, Mayo talked extensively. It was supposed to be his one availability of the week, which he's required to do. He punted on the quarterback decision. He said he had made the quarterback decision, but he hadn't informed anybody yet. There was too much going on, with all the roster shuffling and things like that. I understand that. Look, there's no hard and fast rule that you can't talk 2 days in a row. He could. And look, I give him and Stacey James and Aaron Salkin and those guys credit for getting Jerod available to us on Thursday. But look, this is a big decision. This is all anybody's talking about. This is your football team. This is the third overall pick that we're dealing with. And for you to be up there for 90 seconds, not even, it's not a joke. It's just wrong. Like, if you make the decision, you need to sit up there and you need to answer all the questions and let it all hang out. I mean, because we're not going to talk to him again, I think, till Monday, something like that. And at that point, he's going to want to talk about the Bengals. Like, we're in the Bengals week. We're into the season. Now we got to go back after we've already talked to the players, and now we got to dissect the quarterback decision more. I mean, I know we all know what Bill would have done. Bill would have talked to us yesterday, and then it would have leaked last night from somebody that they had made the decision, and we wouldn't have talked to Bill until Monday, and Bill would have said, if you guys want to talk about the Bengals, we could talk about the Bengals. But, I'm done talking about the quarterback. Like, that's what he would have done. So is Jerod doing more? Yes, but I still think today was a misstep. Like, just, stick by your convictions and answer all the questions. And I know it's a busy day and you got this and that going on, but you could push those things back. You're the head coach of the Patriots. You're not exactly launching nuclear weapons behind the scenes. So, like, give us 10 minutes. Let's do the thing. And then next week, we can all move on to the team, the Bengals, the regular season. Now we can't do that.
Yeah, I thought he took a slide closer to Belichick handling this than he has before, giving you guys 90 seconds. I did want to ask you, were you given a shot to ask quite like how was it handled? Because all we saw was he went up there, he made the announcement. There was 2 questions, and then he got up and left. Did you guys have a chance to ask questions, or was it just you went off of what he did and he stood up and was like, I'm done? Did Stacey James tell you guys you only have 2 questions? How was it handled?
So it was a little chaotic, and I was in the back, and so sometimes it's hard to hear in that room the new way that they have the media room set up in this new area. It's much harder to hear things from that's going up at the front, and also it's probably hard for the front to hear the back. And so I think what happened was, I think it was Stacey or it was Aaron Salkin, I'm not sure exactly who, said Jerod's going to make a statement and take 2 questions. And that was it.
Okay. So it was set to you guys. You got 2 questions and then we're done. Interesting. The other question I had for you, were players in the facility on Tuesday? Do you know?
So today's Thursday. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because they played Sunday. They would have been off on Monday, but
Right.
They could have gotten to the regular season mode. We're giving them Tuesday off too, back Wednesday. They could have been. They very likely could have been out.
I just asked that because if the players were there on Tuesday, I would have questioned why Jerod just didn't address the quarterback situation on Tuesday with them, and then he could have announced it on Wednesday, yesterday, when he had his scheduled media availability. And I think it does kind of open up the questions of whether or not he did it this way so he didn't have to necessarily face more questions when the decision was made. But what's done is done. We know Jacoby Brissett is starting week 1 against Cincinnati. Is that the right decision, Greg?
100%. And, you can look at this a bunch of different ways. And I don't think it's just the right decision because of what we saw from the offensive line and where the team is. I hear a lot of discussion about like Drake's ready, but the Patriots aren't. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, do I think that Drake could go out there and compete and possibly win the opener against the Bengals? Yeah, I guess so. And there's a lot of stuff that the coaches know that we don't know in terms of how Drake's doing in the meeting room, how he's doing as far as, diagnosing things in practice against the Patriots defense. How was he against blitzes? We can see stuff live on the practice field, but we don't have the practice film to sort of really dissect things. The scourge of free runners in practice for a long time when Drake was at quarterback, is that on him or is it on the line or what? Like, we don't know the answers to that, but I'll say this. I'll put it this way. If the Patriots, and first of all, they wouldn't have the 3rd overall pick if this was the case, but if the Patriots were further along, if they had like a franchise left tackle and they had to go along with Andrews and Owenu and, maybe a number 1 wide receiver, do I think Drake Maye would have won the job over Jacoby Brissett? We all know this it's impossible to say, but I just say no, Nick. I think at the end of the day, analyzing his film, where he's come, and the progress has been astounding. It's been terrific over the last 3 weeks, basically since the Eagles joint practice. It's been great. He keeps checking off boxes on things that he needs to do to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League, specifically in this offense. In this game, he checked off getting under center, doing play action, turning your back to the defense, and diagnosing, reading it, and throwing a nice ball to Jalen Polk on 2nd and 2 on play action. So that was nice. But, and he certainly, Drake Maye is certainly extremely athletic, can throw the ball. The ball comes off his hands easily. I don't love totally the motion and things like that, but, all the bones are there. So, when you have that sort of elite traits, and that's why he was picked third overall, you could make the argument that of all the quarterbacks in this draft class, that in totality, Drake has the best tools in terms of his size, arm strength, running ability, sturdiness, his mindset, his easygoing style, his level playing style, mentally. Like, you could say that he's all of those things. I think the only reason he was taken third instead of first was because he just doesn't have the experience of the other guys. And so, there's a lot of good stuff going on with Drake Maye, but I just don't think he's ready. And and I'm sure there are people like, well, he outplayed Jacoby in the games. And you could certainly say that. I wouldn't argue with that. I would say that I think people are sort of short shrifting Jacoby and what he did in that final game. I thought he did a lot of good stuff in that game. I actually, on a play-by-play basis, I think he played better than Drake on the whole, but he only played like, a handful of plays, probably due to the shoulder injury that he sustained. But I think that, Drake makes plays and you see that, but a lot of that is just a really good athlete against inferior players, second and third stringers from other teams, really simple schemes. You can't just take, he did this in the preseason and say he's going to do this in the regular season in the National Football League. I just don't think they're comparable. They're two completely different games. Sorry. And I just don't think he's ready for that quite yet. I do think he's going to get there sooner than I thought, but I don't think he's ready for Lou Amorono, the Bengals defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, the Seahawks defensive coordinator, the Jets, the 49ers in the first month. I just don't think he's ready for any of that stuff. And so I need to be more sure. I think the coaches need to be more sure that he can do that before they want to put him in.
It was the right decision to start Brissett week one. And sometimes I just try to break it down to its simplest form. What's the higher probability of hurting Maye?
Yep.
Or I don't mean legitimately hurting Maye on the field. I mean hurting his development, hurting his future. What's more probable to do that? Starting him week one or starting him later in the year, right? Like, to me, if you start him week one, there's more risk inherently that something goes wrong. Anything goes wrong with the rookie quarterback, and then he has to reset. He's got to go back to some of the original things he had to work on. Whereas, just take your time. I don't think anybody believes this is a playoff team. So why not give it an extra few weeks if you think you can figure some things out, which gets to get it settled, right? Get it settled as much as you can.
Yep.
I don't think Greg and I are sitting here telling you that by week 5, this will be a top 5 offensive line. But figure out what you have up front, settle it, and when you feel like you can trust at least 4 of the 5 guys, then you throw them out there. But it also goes beyond the offensive line. I think we forget how new this offense is and how much turnover was done. New scheme, new OC, tight ends brought in, right? 2 of your 3 tight ends on the roster, new to this football team. The wide receiver room is completely different than it was last year, especially with Kendrick Bourne starting on the PUP list. Your new OC, by the way, hasn't called plays on a weekly basis since 2009. So why don't you just try to settle those things, straighten them out, and when you feel more confident in those elements, then you play Drake Maye. Nobody's going to care. If we're sitting here having a conversation, Greg, you and I, in 2025 in December, and Drake Maye is a legitimate franchise quarterback, nobody's going to give a shit if he played week 1 or week 7 of this season.
Yep.
Nobody's going to care. It's not even a conversation, which leads me to my final point. The very fact that we had this conversation and entertained the idea of Drake Maye starting week 1, that's the biggest story here. Dan Orlovsky told you this guy might take 2 years to be ready. Greg and many others said, hey, look, it might take him a year. It might be later in the year when he starts. The fact that we even had this conversation, Greg, to me, is the biggest story of all, because that tells us Drake Maye has developed, and he's developed more rapidly than many of us thought he would.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Nick. And, that's very exciting. And I'm happy to see it. I'm happy that for him to prove me wrong. I mean, I do think, there's a lot of things that he's doing well. You still see on film, he reverts back to some of his UNC stuff where, he'll step up into pressure where he doesn't really need to do that. Sometimes he makes really nice subtle pocket movement to get away from pressure and to deliver the ball. But other times he's moving into things. And, I think that, Nick, the first point you brought up to me is really when this whole sort of discussion this week started, like, that's sort of where I was, which is, okay, somebody has to tell me what is the upside to Drake Maye starting week 1. I mean, do we think this team's going to be a playoff team? No, nobody does. I mean, the chances of that are very long. So, what are we talking about here? Like, I know I was on TV and Michael Hawley's like, well, you need to win as many games as possible. Okay. And this isn't just specific to the Patriots. We see it all the time in the NFL. And this is what I almost always say when you talk about a new offensive coordinator and new scheme, let alone all the new personnel that you pointed out. Pretty much every time by book, I say, okay, it's going to take half a season for that stuff to come together. You're hoping to hold water until it starts to click for everybody. And then the second half of the season, you want to sort of see everything go on an upward trajectory. And so, that's all part of this. I mean, I just think too much can go wrong playing him early with and there's not much upside. I mean, what's the best upside if Drake Maye starts? Okay, maybe you steal a game or two in the first half of the season that maybe you didn't think before, but but there's too much risk there that what's going to happen when he gets into these games. And I like to use the Mac Jones example. When he started against the Dolphins, his rookie year at home, it was Josh Boyer on the other side. It was Brian Flores. And I remember, and I wrote this at the time, and I wrote this live. I wrote it when I watched the film. The amount of stuff that Flores and Boyer threw at Mac Jones in that game would render most NFL rookie quarterbacks a puddle. I mean, double corner blitzes, false indicators, all sorts of stuff, and all out blitzes. And Mac completed his adjusted completion percentage in that game. I want to say it was over 70%. They lost 17-16 because Damian Harris fumbles when they're in field goal range. Mac Jones did a tremendous job. And there was probably not since Andrew Luck has there been a quarterback in the NFL as prepared for that game to survive that type of game. And that's because of where Mac came from at Alabama with Brian Daboll and Steve Sarkisian and Nick Saban and a pro-style offense. He had Josh McDaniels. He had players around him. They brought in talent, Hunter Henry, they had Jacoby Myers. They had these guys. And, they had a plan and they executed. And that's the best case scenario. It doesn't get much better than that as far as a rookie quarterback. There's too many times where, Drake, who comes from a, much more green background than Mac Jones, he goes out there and now Anarumo's throwing all these things that he's never seen before or never experienced them. And now Drake Maye is trying to survive the game instead of playing the game. And when you're trying to survive, that means you don't care about your footwork. You don't care about your reads. You don't care about any of that stuff. You're just trying to survive. And that's when you get regression. So to me, I don't think there's any upside that you can get starting him early than starting him in week 5, 9, 12, whatever. All you want to do is you want to see Drake Maye play consistent winning football and to keep going upwards like he is. And I just think you're really risking that, and it's not worth it starting him earlier rather than later. Greg Bedard here to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You got to check it out. The app is so easy to use. I love it. I'm all over it. This football season, I'm going to be all over it. For example, this week, opening week of football, I'm going Tyreek Hill for more than 90 receiving yards and Dak Prescott for more than 263 passing yards. And also Josh Allen for less than 240 passing yards and CeeDee Lamb for more than 96 receiving yards. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
With all of that said, I found it interesting. Jerod Mayo comes out and says that Jacoby was the guy who was outplayed by Drake Maye. And you also had Jerod Mayo speaking with Yahoo Sports' Jory Epstein last week saying, hey, look, if May outplays him or whoever outplays who, that's pretty much it, right? What else is there to be said? Meanwhile, Alex Van Pelt in the same story in Yahoo said, I think Brissett is pretty much more ready, more prepared to be the guy on opening night or opening day. And so there seemed to be a little bit of a disconnect there in the Yahoo story. And that disconnect felt like it was furthered by Mayo saying what he said about May outplaying Brissett. Is this what Jerod Mayo wanted? Or do you think Mayo wanted Drake Maye to start week 1?
It's a great question, Nick. I think that I'll start with this. I think there's a lot of stuff that that Mayo thinks he knows that he doesn't know. And I think this decision is something that's really not his expertise. And, I think, some of the way he talked about these things. And remember, go back to the beginning of training camp, the day before training camp started, Jerod said, if Drake goes out there and is lights out, like he could win the game. Like, I don't think anybody would say that Drake Maye has been lights out in practice, in the games. Has he been better than Jacoby, especially the last 3 weeks? Yeah. But to me, that's not lights out. But in terms of, and I also think, Mayo going out there and talking about it's a competition and, the better players are going to play. Like that's not true. This isn't a 2-down inside run stuffing linebacker. This isn't a slot cornerback when, you could pretty much say we're going to play the best players. This is the number 3 overall pick. This is quarterback. There's a lot more goes into this. I mean, I think, what some people forget or just don't even know, Jacoby Brissett started against the Bengals 2 years ago and beat them with Alex Van Pelt as his offensive coordinator. He outplayed Joe Burrow. He had like a 130 rating in that game. Yeah, they ran 44 times in the game, but that's the exact way these Patriots are going to be competitive and try to win games. Later on that season, Deshaun Watson came back and he lost to the Bengals. And so, Jacoby, especially with his experience for 2 years in the AFC North, he's been part of game planning for the Bengals and this defensive coordinator and all that stuff. And I just think there's so much that goes into playing quarterback in the National Football League. I think, as is typical of most defensive head coaches, I think Jerod has tried to use too blunt an instrument, or at least verbally, as far as the decision, when it's a lot more nuanced than that. He's tried to point it out, but there's been too many times where he has sort of stuck his foot in his mouth.
So a few things. I just kind of think of defensive guy and what defensive guy thinks of quarterbacks when they watch quarterbacks. Because they don't, as you said, Greg, they don't know all the nuance. Belichick might because he's been in football for 150 years.
Yep.
But when you're new to this thing, you don't get all the nuance that Alex Van Pelt understands, whether it's on a very foundational, fundamental level, or if it's elite level. You just don't quite get it. So I could see Jerod Mayo looking at Drake Maye saying, oh, he's the most talented quarterback. He's the most dangerous quarterback we have on this team. Maybe we should play him. Because if I'm a defensive coordinator and I'm calling all this great stuff, but his natural talent beats me, that's infuriating. I know I could get to Jacoby Brissett.
Right.
So I could see him kind of playing that in his mind. As far as what Mayo has said and what's been done, I think he has a big problem with consistent messaging, lack thereof. I think that problem is because he talks a lot. I think he talks a lot because he's trying to be the anti-Belichick. But when you talk a lot and you get a lot of word salad, it leads to contradicting yourself at times. And that's what we've seen with Jerod, because he's in this trail of words, and inevitably it kind of circles back and bites him in the ass. The final thing I will say is actions versus words, right? Like, you could sit there and tell me that it was a quarterback competition. I'm pretty sure Greg will agree with this. This was not a quarterback competition. It's not a quarterback competition when the rookie quarterback gets his first team reps for the first time, on a Wednesday before the last preseason game. And when he's getting these number one reps, they're all handoffs, and Brissett is beating him 4-1 as far as reps with the ones. It's not a competition when he doesn't get a single snap with the first team in the joint practice. So it was rather obvious, if you're watching this play out, if you're there, this was not a quarterback competition. But I understand Mayo trying to make it sound that way, and I think he did that to try to keep both feet to the fire, right? Both sets of feet to the fire, push Brissett to continue to try to keep the rookie away, try to drive the rookie. But I think Drake Maye, and he said some of this a little bit earlier today in the locker room, I think the team knew. I mean, just how things were handled, it was rather obvious.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, if, I can only contrast it to, Mac Jones and Cam Newton. And, while certainly Mac took a back seat to Cam, for a while, but as he started to play better, and maybe Drake got off to a little bit of a slow start in camp, and that changed things. And again, Mac and Drake were coming from two different situations. Mac could definitely start on a higher plane in that Patriots offense than Drake could in this one. And so, but yeah, I mean, if they truly wanted to fast track the kid, then they would have more evenly split the number one reps. He would have gotten more reps, certainly in the Eagles joint practice, but he wasn't ready for that at that point. And Mayo kept saying that. We kept asking him about, like, when is he going to get reps with the ones? And he's like, when he's ready, he will. He never really did. And so that should tell you that, it wasn't really a competition, which I have no problem with, because I'm all about development, and all I care about is Drake Maye for opening day 2025. Anything else, I don't really care. Whatever you need to do to get him to be the best quarterback possible for this franchise by September 2025, that's what I'm here for. And I do think they're on the right path. I think that, Alex Van Pelt knows, what needs to happen, how Drake Maye needs to be developed. I think he's been very clear that Drake is a bit of a project and he's got a ways to go, and that, Jacoby can hold the fort down for now and gives them a better chance because he can deal with the blitzes and all this stuff. He has more in his toolbox. He said that. He has more tools available to him. Drake will get there, and the way Drake has improved over the last 3 weeks, he could be there in 2 or 3 weeks, the way he has rapidly improved. And so I'm not doubting Drake Maye at all. I've been very impressed with his demeanor, and also the way he has processed and improved. I don't think people really quite knew what he was going to do in that area, but it's been terrific. And so, the sky's the limit for this kid, but you gotta bring him up right. And Nick, and I use this analogy, developing like a franchise quarterback, unless they're a finished product, it's a lot like baking a cake. Like you put it in, and about 20 minutes in, man, that cake smells really good, and you start to get hungry, and I want to eat it. We know Patriots fans are hungry for good quarterback play, but you can't take it out of the oven just because it smells good. It's not cooked all the way through, and if you slice into it, it's ruined. If you slice into it too early, it's ruined. And so, Drake and the quarterback development to me is the same way. Let them bake. Let them bake all the way through, and trust me, the goodness is going to follow. It's that time of year. It's starting to get a little bit cooler here. You know what that means to me? It means football season. And football season, to me, is something that you have to enjoy. You have to be a part of the experience in person, whether it's pro, college, high school, what have you. There's nothing like being in the stands for a football game. And with that, got to find a way to get there. And for me, it's Game Time. The Game Time app, gametime.co. Go check them out. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Patriots are playing at the Bengals. I'm sure some of you would love to see the debut of the Jerod Mayo era. Just also remember that the Cincinnati football team has a history of slow starting, not very good in the openers. So, if you're looking for an upset, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It certainly is not. So make sure you go check out the tickets. I just booked my flight. Flights are reasonable. Go check it out. Part of what I love about this app is you get the view from the seats. I have to have that. I don't care if I'm going to a concert, baseball, football, whatever. I have to know what I can see. Am I going to have a good view? Are people going to be in front of me? All that stuff. So make sure you check that out. They also have all-in pricing. Toggle this feature to show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You've been on other ticket applications and you're like, oh, this is a good deal. Suddenly you get there and there's like $75 worth of fees. Game Time takes that out with all-in prices. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. What time is it? Game time.
One more question about the quarterback situation, Greg, before we move on to the 53-man roster. What I find interesting here now is, there's actually two questions I got. The first question, let's start here. There's no veteran quarterback insurance on this roster right now, right? Because Zappy's gone. He's in Kansas City. And so now you have a situation where Jacoby gets hurt week one, and nobody is, wishing injury to Brissett. But let's just say, hypothetically, I know Phil Perry asked this question after the game on Sunday night, and now it really makes a lot of sense to talk about it. If Brissett gets hurt week one, it's first quarter, Cincinnati, somebody blows a block, Brissett goes down. You're left with May and Milton. And that I find interesting. I think not because, May's not quite ready, because you could argue, and I'm sure the Patriots would argue, we're not saying that Drake's not ready to play in an NFL game. We just think Brissett is more ready than Drake to play in an NFL game. Mm-hmm. But the pieces around Drake, right? If you wanted to use Brissett as the quote-unquote sacrificial lamb, if the sacrificial lamb goes down, what do you do now? Because if May's not as ready as Brissett, Milton is nowhere near as ready as Drake Maye or Brissett. So it's interesting that right now they don't have, on the 53-man or in the practice squad, there's no veteran presence at that position.
Yeah, I would be stunned by, say, like Monday, that there's not some sort of veteran on the practice squad. Now, actually, my preferred guy, given his experience with Alex Van Pelt in that system, was Case Keenum of the Texans, but I think he's on IR now, or he's at least out 2 or 3 months. He's he got hurt in, I think it was the final preseason game for the Texans. He has a lot of experience, has been around. Another guy who would be a great tutor for Drake Maye. I haven't quite looked at the list to see what else is out there. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson made the team in Cleveland, I want to say. But they're going to have to get somebody in here at some point. But I agree with you that their moves indicate that they're okay if Drake has to go into the game. Now, I think it'll be very tightly managed. I still don't like that plan. I mean, I'm fine with going with him as a backup, and then if he gets in, a lot of running the ball, too tight at max protect, dialing things down, very simple. That's fine to get you through a game. But beyond that, I still have a lot of issues with that. And so I'm very interested to see what they do as far as the veteran quarterback on the practice squad to give themselves option sometime in the next 3, 4, 5 days.
Here's my last question now on the quarterback deal. So we know Brissett's QB1. Apologies to Mark Bertrand, who for some reason hates that term. You have May and Milton. So my question is the reps moving forward. If you do want May to eventually start, let's just say week 5, what's the plan moving forward? How has he handled that practice? Is he getting reps with the ones? What are they doing there?
I think, in keeping the 3 quarterbacks and let alone what they do on the practice squad. So Joe Milton will be the scout team quarterback, I would assume. And his athletic ability certainly gives a different dimension. I mean, they don't need it against, maybe he's Joe Burrow this week. Maybe Drake Maye's Joe Burrow this week, which would be interesting. But, Geno Smith, other guys, I could see that being Joe Milton. He's going to get some reps. It's not going to be very much. I'm not totally worried about that. He's still going to get the QB school training that he's been getting, and really that's what he needs. He's got, Nick, in my mind, the biggest impediment to him playing in an NFL game now is he is just really uncomfortable under center. He is. Now, we saw him execute the play action pass, and that was great, but he's slow getting away from center. He drops snaps. He seems to be more worried about just getting the snap than anything else. And that stuff can come from practice and what he's going to get at practice. So I don't think you're hurting the team if you make it a 50-50 split in practice. There might be a certain point in time, say Jacoby starts 0-3 and he's struggling. Now all of a sudden you're splitting the reps in practice, and now you're throwing the competition open again. But yeah, I think it's going to be a minimal amount, but I'm not too worried about that.
All right, let's jump to the 53 and let's go through a few things that you did not have correct on your 53-man roster. Let's start with Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver position. Of course, Boutte and Reagor both made the initial 53-man. Yesterday, Reagor was cut. Looks like he's going to be on the practice squad. He was at practice today. So it looks like Reagor will be on the practice squad. But Kayshon Boutte makes it, Greg. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. Not that Kayshon didn't play well this summer. I think he did. It was more about, for me at the time, it was more about a numbers game. I kept 6. And so I opted for Reagor's special teams value where Boutte doesn't really have any. But from, what I understand, I know the Patriots, they respect how productive he has been for them, even dating back to last season. And this summer in practice and things like that, he was the most productive wide receiver that they had. So that, that means something to them. I think there was the thought that he was of some value to other teams, and maybe they wanted to keep that going a little bit. Maybe they were looking to trade him, but weren't getting enough. And now the Patriots called their bluff and kept him on the roster. Not that I think he's going to have any great value or anything like that, but the kid could play. He doesn't have a whole lot of upside as far as speed. So, that's why I took Reagor and his speed and special teams over Boutte. but I definitely see why they kept him.
I think it's an indication as to, hey, they believe in Tyquan Thornton right now, or at least they want Tyquan to prove it, because you don't have anybody that has that kind of speed outside of Thornton on this roster now. You could have, as you mentioned, Rager, but he'll be on the practice squad. Yes, you can eventually call him up and keep him on the roster, yada, yada. But at least to start the year, this is, hey, Tyquan, you're the X. You're the guy to get downfield. Let's prove it now. Let's stay on the field. Let's get some production and prove yourself. Another guy, I didn't get this at all. And I said this last night when I was subbing in for Joe Murray. I did not get this. I thought he played like garbage against Philly. I thought he played like garbage against Washington. He was picked on. He had several penalties. Marcellus Dial makes the team. And Sean Wade, I have not been the biggest proponent of Sean Wade, but Sean Wade is somebody who can play multiple positions in that secondary and was at least solid. Dial got his ass torched over and over and over again. Yet, as of right now, Thursday, August 29th, Greg, Dial's on the roster.
Yeah, this was the shocker to me. Now, for a long time, I had Dial on my roster, and actually I had him on my when I released my 53 the morning after the Commanders game. But once I watched the game film from the Commanders game, I changed, and I took him off and I put Wade on. And I totally agree with you. I mean, you know, what he did in the two preseason games, there's no way that you can make the argument that he should be on this team for what happened in those games. He was bad, stopped his feet, he's grabbing, penalties, like you said. Now, I will say this. Marcellus Dial has talent. I think he was a lot better in the practices than he was in the games. I do think that he has special teams value as a gunner. He was getting a lot of work in that area, so perhaps that factored into it. But, Nick, I don't know if you agree with me, but I don't know. I thought this was kind of a bad look by the front office. Like, they almost had to – it's the first time they've kept all their draft picks since 1997. I think that was Pete Carroll's first season. Another time where they went through regime change from a big, bad, meanie guy in Bill Parcells to the vibes guy with Pete Carroll. And it's almost like they're trying to prove a point that these are our guys. We picked good players. Bill picked bad players. And look at all of our draft picks on the roster. I mean, I just think I just thought it was poor. There's no way. Look, it's not that I don't think Dial can play. I do think Dial can play. I just think he's really, really raw and deserved to be on the practice squad and develop there. And that he's on this roster is a little bit of a joke to me.
Probably not going to be able to see it, but for the people looking on YouTube or watching on YouTube, I have a note there. It says, Dial on the roster, arrow, not a BB guy, and in parentheses, Wade/Bolden. I wrote that before Greg just brought up that last point. That's how I felt. I felt like Dial made this roster because he was drafted in April. Yep. And Belichick might have been, in the camp of Sean Wade and Isaiah Bolden. This front office, not necessarily in those camps, so said, let's keep our guy. Let's keep our guy instead of the other guys, and we'll see how it plays out. All right, Joe Giles Harris, not on the team.
Yeah, after, he had a big pick in the game, I did feel a little bit odd, because I kept Christian Ellis and Giles Harris on my roster, which is a little linebacker heavy, but I was just looking for, good players. They were few and far between. And by the way, all these guys who either didn't, or that I had on my roster, or some of the guys who have gotten released since with the waiver claims, like these guys were all designated by me as could be released in a waiver claim. So we're talking about the bottom of the roster guys, and you could go either way. I thought he was really good, really productive, but you don't really need a whole lot of linebackers in today's NFL.
Last one, we got Del Pettis over Joshua Bledsoe.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was close. I mean, Dell was very productive in the games. He's done a nice job. I just thought, Bledsoe was just as good and he's more experienced. And I just think there are too many moving pieces with, relying on Jalen Hawkins at free safety where we're not really sure about him, that I wanted a little bit more experience. And I just thought Del Pettis was a guy that you could get back on the practice squad. But obviously they disagreed.
All right, we got one more thing to talk about, but before we get into that, I want to remind you, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Of course, BSJ, Boston Sports Journal, Greg's website, do a terrific job. Check out Bedard and Giardi tag teaming on the Patriots, $50 for the year. And finally, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, let's quickly go through the Commanders game, Greg. Just a quick version of the 3 things you liked, 3 things you didn't like. Let's start with 3 things you didn't like so we end the pod on a high note.
Okay. All the penalties, obviously, especially on the offensive line. I mean, a core 4 couldn't even line up right. And I understand there's been a lot of outcry about, like, why didn't they just bench him and this and that? Well, this isn't a regular season game. Like, this was the first time that these guys were on the field together, and they needed to see them on the field. They needed film. They needed to see how it worked. And benching a core 4 wasn't going to help that process. So if you did that, you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face, and that's just not going to happen. If that happened in a regular season game, I think you can bet your ass that a core 4 would have been benched pretty quickly with that. Marcellus Dial and the secondary reserves. I mean, this is 2 straight games in the preseason where, for the most part, the Patriots dominated a lot of the game, were on their way to victory, and then suddenly the secondary got thrown all over. Mostly Marcellus Dial and Azizi Hearn. In this one,
Azizi had a night, didn't he? My God,
yeah, he did. And so I'm sorry to see Azizi go. And what was the third thing? Oh, Joe Milton. I think we saw Bazooka Joe, Little Wild Joe. In this one, he was a little bit all over the place. I think did I hear he was like 5 of 13 or something like that passing. Like, it's not all his fault. And you look who he's playing with, and the guy Charles Turner at center, who Felger didn't want to hear about, was a ridiculous turnstile like under center. So it's not all his fault, but it just shows Joe's got a way to go.
Yeah, it's the old Alex Barth. I don't know if I'll get it right, but, Joe Milton, if you need an 80-yard pass, you get you an 80-yard pass. Mm-hmm. If you need a 5-yard pass, you get you an 80-yard pass. Like,
yep.
we saw him throwing seeds, and I was just thinking, like, I would hate to be one of those guys. I'd hate to be a running back going out into the flat and Milton just ripping a 98-mile-an-hour fastball high and hard to me. I'd be like, Joe, can you calm down, man? I know it's not easy to throw those touch passes at times, but for the love of God. All right, let's finish on 3 things you like.
So we talked about May, but I'm going to boil it down to, like, he showed with, I think there were 7 snaps under center, and he was 2 of 2 on passes from under center, play action. There was the poke play, and then there was also the shoeless Drake Maye play where So took a bad step, but that is also another example of Drake not getting away from center quick enough. And he does that a lot. Like, there was another snap where he sort of like double clutched, and he does that a lot in practice as well. But at least he got out there. Look, for Drake Maye, a guy who played in the shotgun all the time, for him to get under center in an NFL game and turn his back on play action and do that poke pass, that's a good indication of where he can go, that it's going to be in his bag eventually. It's just a little rough right now, but just that he was able to do that and show that was a nice check mark. Number 2, most of the blocking of the new offensive line. Like, I know it's tough to see underneath the avalanche of flags that were being thrown, and especially you see linemen bumping into each other. By the way, a quick aside on that play where Brissett got hurt. Yeah. So I blame 3 people on that play: City Layden Robinson, and Jermichael Hasty on that play. And I'll tell you why. First of all, Robinson gets pushed back a bit, like a yard, and that's not ideal, but it shouldn't be a death sentence. What makes it a death sentence is that City So doesn't take a proper drop step. When you pull as a guard, what you're supposed to do is, your right foot goes back and gives you a better angle to come around. And this was going to be a tight end screen the other way to Jaheim Bell. And so even if Layden Robinson doesn't get pushed back, I'm not sure So's in the right position to even make that block, because I think he's too shallow. He doesn't take a good enough angle. Now, even if those things happen, and I don't know the rules in this offense, but in most NFL offenses, if the play calls for a play action fake by the running back, you are allowed to abort the fake if somebody's coming in unblocked. If you think they're going to come in and kill your quarterback, you can just say, hell no, I'm going straight for the guy. And Hasty did not do that. Now, I don't know the exact rules in this offense, but that's normally the case. So those three guys I had to blame. But I will say, I thought the blocking overall, I only had a core for one pressure. Layden Robinson had some really rough plays. He did. But he also had some really nice plays. And I would say there were a lot more of those in this game. At times it looked a little big for him, but other times, he was really good. He's so strong and he finishes well. Michael Winu got off to a slow start and he's slow of foot and probably still overweight, Michael Lombardi. But he did do a lot of nice things. City So I thought was probably the sketchiest of them all out there. I was really surprised by some of his technique issues. But also remember, you put David Andrews out there instead of Nick Leverett, and things look a lot different. So I don't think the offensive line was as bad as everybody thought. And related to that, my number 3 thing was the Patriots running backs got 1.85 yards before contact running the ball. Nick, coming into that game, they had averaged 0.3 in the same category. Yep. The league average was like 1.5. So they were over the league average. So that was a lot of progress for them running the ball, which was a good sign.
I'll say a couple things here. My offensive line concern meter. Our last podcast, I think I said, I'm not quitting on this offensive line. They still have 3 guys that you can depend on in the interior. I think they could find a 4th guy out of what they got. Last week, the concern meter was probably about a 4 to a 5. Today it's about a 6 to a 7. I'm not freaking out yet. Yes, I was frustrated. I was pissed on Sunday night with the flags. I thought it was a rough night for Layden Robinson. But here's the thing. This is where you got to show a little bit of humility. I'm not an offensive line guru. I'm not breaking down film. Greg does that. Evan Lazar does that. Brandon Thorne does that. And from what I've seen from all those 3 guys, Greg just said it, they all pretty much agree that the blocking wasn't as bad as it looked, and we're remembering the worst of the worst. So, yes, I had my initial, what the hell is going on? This is a disaster. But then I listened to the people who know more than I do. And so, thinking about it, I still feel, hey, they've got the interior of the offensive line if they want it with Owenu at right guard. But they have options. They still have options. Caden Wallace was pretty good on Sunday night.
Yep.
Robinson, that was the first time we saw Robinson really feel the moment. He's a rookie. That happens. I'm not freaking out about Layden Robinson. I thought it was telling today, Greg, City So's out, Vedarian Lowe's out. Now, Mayo said both guys, doesn't seem too serious, which is good news. But I did find it interesting. Before we go, I wanted to ask you this. The line at practice today, the starting line was Chooks at left tackle. Hopefully he lined up correctly at practice. Nick Leverett moved to left guard. David Andrews is your center. Here's what I found telling. Owenu stayed at right tackle. Robinson was still at right guard. So the reason why I find that interesting is with City So out, you could have kept Owenu at right guard, kicked Robinson to the left, but they didn't. They kept Owenu at right tackle. They could have put Wallace at right tackle after Sunday night, right? But they didn't. Yep. They kept Owenu at right tackle. That makes me believe that they're really contemplating playing Owenu at right tackle, keeping Robinson as part of this offensive line. And then, if you look at it, Greg, I don't think that's insane because whether it's Leverett or So, you feel like those guys can pretty much handle their ass at left guard. David Andrews is solid. We both like Robinson. We both think that Onwenu, while not the perfect tackle, he's at least shown that he could play good tackle in the NFL. And now you're really just looking at left. Can Chooks figure it out? Can Vidarian Lowe come back and push him?
Yep.
But how do you feel? Do you take the same from the line today that I took?
Yeah, I do. And one other thing on that. Leverett, who is more of a guard than he is a center.
Yes.
It seems like that's a placeholder thing, probably for So. They were probably with So. They were probably like, just take the week, and we'll see where you are on Monday, and plug you back in. Or the other thing is, Michael Jordan, who I had on my roster, who got released in these cut downs and just signed back to the practice squad. I really like Michael Jordan. I mean, I don't think he's a starter or a star or anything like that, but in terms of, you could tell he's been in this like outside wide zone scheme before. He's probably technically the best guy in terms of executing that in the run. So whether I could definitely see it being a case where if it's iffy on So, or maybe they want him to split time, I could see Michael Jordan being a practice squad elevation for the first game and actually playing in the first game instead of like a Leverett if So can't go the whole game.
And one last point, they added Brian Hudson from Louisville. He's an undrafted young man this last April. Why is that of a note? Well, he's on the practice squad. He's a center. So he's actually trained at center without Jake Andrews. They've been trying to figure that out. So at least you have a guy that's used to snapping the football now in your organization. So that might give them a little bit more leeway to move Leverett back to guard, his natural position where he was today. All right, that'll do it. He's Greg. I'm Nick. See ya.